will start. Thank you so much. All right, welcome to this Saturday morning Q&A with Warrior at Law. We've brought this space together to be of service. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of confusion. There's so many different ways to skin a cat. Pardon me saying that to all the vegans, but there are more than one way to skin a cat. All right, so it can be overwhelming with the amount of information and misinformation. And for those of you who follow my YouTube channel, you know it triggers me a little bit, misinformation. So we're going to start off with looking at questions that were emailed in. So just bear with me. I'm going to bring up Zev and my notes. Okay, so someone asked a really valid question. In Australia, how do we stop police from pressuring you for a breathalyzer or a swab sample for alcohol breathalyzer or drug swab? Now, I just want to put a disclaimer in. I'm going to base this answer as if this person has an Australian driving license. This is based on the driving license, for example, Service New South Wales or Queensland Transport, etc. So that little card there is a contract. And if you look at the fine print of that contract, it states that you agree to Queensland Transport, adding new bylaws in, adding infringements, changing the road rules at any time. You've agreed to that. And part of that is statutory legislative laws. So that's important. So in the fine print, you have agreed to their rules using, I hate to say this, their roads. So you cannot avoid a lawful requirement, but you can stop the pressure and the coercion and the overreach, which can happen to us when we're stopped sometimes. So Australia has a compulsory, if we're using that little contract, and if we're not using the contract, we can't use their roads at all. You're going to have to move to Sovereignty Planet and build your own roads, unfortunately. So Australia has compulsory breath tests and saliva swabs under state road safety legislation. So the police power to demand a sample is actually not, it doesn't have to be consensual, unfortunately. It's a statutory compulsion. Refusal is legally treated the same as a positive reading. So if you haven't been drinking 3 pints of beer and you get stopped, but you refuse, they will treat you as if you've had a positive reading and as if you have had a positive reading with alcohol. So you can stop pressure, threats, coercion, and unlawful escalation, because this has happened many, many times with different police officers. So you can do this in several ways, and I want to thank Zev for his guidance here, and we've all shared him talking about these things in the past. So we can do this by requiring the officer to identify the exact statutory authority they rely upon, asking for reasonable time, reasonable grounds, and procedural certainty, documenting duress so the sample is not voluntary, and preventing fishing expeditions. They often do go beyond their scope, and I know there's some amazing living men and women on this call today who've had to experience that, unfortunately. Now, I'm always about the devil is in the detail, and because we can't move to Privacy Planet, and when we go outside our front door at the moment, I'm not saying this is right, so please don't shoot the messenger, but we do live in a statutory world. So the exact legislation giving police this power. So let's look at our breath tests. The police powers in New South Wales, it is the Road Transport Act 2013. Police may require a person to submit to a breath test, breath analysis, and refusal is an offence under Section 16. Whatever state you're in, I thoroughly recommend that you look up the data every time. Education is power. So I won't go through the other safety acts of Victoria, Queensland, etc. Police must have lawful authority and reasonable requirement and then follow the procedure. What you can legally require from the officer. Let's just talk about the legal framework. So we still do have power where we sit. Before you give a sample, you may lawfully ask, for the record, could you state your name, rank, and place of duty? There's no harm in asking them that. Under what section of the Act are you compelling me? I would definitely say that these young police officers will know the Act and the legislation that I just quoted. Are you making a lawful requirement or a request? Please state that clearly. Am I being detained? If so, under what authority? And please state on camera that you're compelling this under threat of penalty. So this removes the presumption of consent. For example, I will comply under protest and duress once I have clarity that this is lawful. This prevents coercion, escalation, fishing expeditions, secondary searches, and intimidation tactics. And it preserves your remedy if it needs to be used later on. So, for example, I don't know if you've seen Tom Barnett and Zev's Battle of the Beards in the past. They're only like 4 years old, but it just seems a lifetime ago that they did that. They were very good at role playing, but there's only me today, so I'm going to have to play both roles. So the officer will say, I require you to submit to a breath or saliva test. You will say, I will comply under protest and duress once I have clarity. For the record, could you please state your name, rank, and station, the exact section of the exact act you are relying upon, and whether this is lawful requirement or a voluntary request. Now, this will irritate the officer. They will usually be irritated at this point. They just want to get their job done. And then you'll say, I'm not refusing. I just require your statutory authority on record before I proceed. Am I being compelled under threat of penalty? Now, they must answer this. And I think we can work out what they're going to say, because they are going to state if you don't submit to this today, you will be penalised as if it is a positive reading. And you'll say, thank you, I comply under duress and without consent, please proceed. Now, I truly believe that whoever sent this question in, and I say this with all respect, was wanting an answer different to this, was wanting me to say, well, this is how we would get out of it. If you want to get out of it, they will take you down to the police station. So back to why what I've just said works, because we're not refusing. So there's no offence here. You remove any presumption that you're voluntary consenting, because you are not, and you limit the officer to only doing what the statute authorises. Let's stay in that little shoebox of the data. As we know, police hate being held to procedure because it prevents them from being able to fish for other charges, random questioning, escalating a minor stop into a major event. They like a bit of drama on their shift, and using intimidation or bluff. Now, there are some circumstances when one can decline a swab or a breath test. However, it's a very narrow alley. Medical exemption. You would have to show medical exemption certificate that you have respiratory issues, anxiety disorder, panic disorder, severe asthma, or lung breathing limitations. So, you at that point, you could say, look, I'm about to have a major asthma attack. But you're going to have to prove it. You can't pretend to have an asthma attack, because he who makes claim bears burden of proof, as we hear Zev say all the time. You must provide evidence or it won't hold. In very minute situations, we've seen that improper procedure invalidates the requirement. For example, if the officer hasn't identified themselves, if the officer has not cited their statutory authority, if you might not be the driver. So sometimes it has been known that they are also asked to breathalyze the person in the back seat. They don't have legislative powers to do that. If you're on private property, so it's not a road related area, if the officer did not observe correct testing procedures, and if they have no reasonable grounds for a saliva swab test, for example, it's not one of those mandatory drive-by drop-in drug tests. If any of these apply, the requirement may be unlawful and you can raise the objection. Now, normally you're going to have to protest afterwards, and that's why keeping a record of all this is so important. However, never outright refuse. Instead, simple script. I am not refusing. I am asking you to show me lawful authority. Once established, I will comply under duress. Now, I'm going to share further information about this in the PDF that you get on Monday. However, uh, I want us to just bring ourselves back to natural law. Do no harm, cause no loss. Why would you not want to do a breath or drug swab test? These are just my humble thoughts around this, and I'm very aligned with natural law educators like Tom Barnett. He feels the same way as me. If you choose to use a road in a car, which I believe is a metal or sometimes now plastic weapon, I would like to think one would not be under the influence of any substance, so I would be happy to oblige. I am more than happy to do the breath test. Now, those of us who are worried about DNA collecting, with the swab, I have a friend who is a police officer and I have asked them this question. It goes straight into the medical waste bin. It binned. They do not keep this for DNA collection data. They're not keeping it to build a DNA database in that procedure. Let's not go down conspiracy rabbit holes right now. I just believe in all things a balanced, measured, common sense approach is required. All right, so before we move on to the next question, I know that, some people might want to add things in the chat. And again, I'm going to go through everything in the chat. Doesn't this all change in the CBD in the next 6 months as they've given themselves powers to stop without reason? That is really, really interesting. This is specifically talking about those mandatory breath tests, on the side of the road. So I will look into that for you, Julie, and that is really important. So I'll add that to the PDF booklet on Monday. May, if you can just take a note of any questions that happen in the chat, because I want to make sure that we fulfill the answers to those as well. Okay. So then we have a question. This is from a really lovely Warrior at Law member who's done the Uniform Commercial Code process with ZEV and doing the UCC filing. And that has so many amazing uses when it comes to protecting the all caps name on the birth certificate. So she says, I'm curious how you go when traveling overseas in regards to whether you comply with the biometrics passport facial scanning and recognition, or if you are exempt or have been made different arrangements with the airlines to not have your face scanned. Does your Uniform Commercial Code legally bound documentation help us in any way with the various laws in each country and their airports? We're looking to travel overseas next year and are naturally concerned with all the digital ID, passport, and facial recognition technology. So, yes, this is Zev's written here. The hard truth first. When traveling internationally, you enter what is arguably the most controlled jurisdiction in the world. Airports operate under international aviation treaties, operates under the IATA rules and commercial contract. So it's actually not governed by each specific country. You would know that every country has an ICAO code. A country is actually not even recognized as a country if it cannot satisfy to have an ICAO code. And that's why some sovereign nations, some private truther movement sovereign nations, there's one near California, they cannot justify getting an ICAO code. So if they do want to travel overseas, they actually have to use a US passport. Border Force operates under domestic statute in each country. And the International Civil Aviation Organization sets global standards for passports and biometrics. It's not individual country based. So this means, in layman's terms, you cannot board an international flight without presenting the ICAO compliant passport. You cannot enter another country without complying with their statutory entry prerequisites. This is not because they have lawful jurisdiction over you. They don't. It is because international air travel is 100% contract based and the other party controls the gateway. So, As we know, airlines are private corporations, countries are corporate governments, and airports are international commercial zones. So none of them will vary their standard requirements based on any alternative process, whether that's the UCC, a private membership association, trusts, etc. So does the UCC filing help overseas? Not for border control and not for airports. What your UCC filing can do, it secures your claim of title to the all caps name entity within your chosen jurisdiction. It rebuts the presumption that you are the surety, and it creates a superior private record of standing. And it does protect you against domestic commercial overreach in whatever land that you're standing on. However, because this is contract based, UCC filings do not overwrite ICAO biometric standards, domestic border statutes, airline boarding requirements, and immigration entry conditions. For international travel, the UCC gives you internal remedy, but it does not alter. This is just airport procedure. So, can you refuse the facial recognition or biometrics? Yes, you can. In most countries, there is a lawful opt-out, but when you're told you come off the plane and you go towards customs and you're put into different rows, your row is going to be the slowest. You must request it verbally. You must be patient. You will be pulled aside. You will be processed manually. It will take much longer and you may be questioned. However, I always say that we've been programmed to be reactive and want ease, and that we want instant gratification. So if you're okay not to have those things, I'm more than okay not to have those things. When you get to the counter, you can ask for this. You will be pulled aside and put into one of those rooms, and you will be interviewed by a customs officer. So in Australia at departure, you can bypass the smart gates and request manual processing. I cannot speak for all countries. I'm just speaking for Australia. At arrival, you can decline the e-gate and request a human officer to cite your passport. They actually cannot force you through the biometric gate, but they can deny entry boarding if you refuse all identity verification. So you can still do it manually. I do know that in other countries, UK, Europe, New Zealand, Canada, Singapore, all still do have manual processing options under their border regulations. There's been a lot of media hype at the moment about the UK, but they still will allow you to do it manually. You simply notify the airline or border officer. You simply say, I do not consent to biometric scanning. I request manual processing, please. They will roll their eyes, but they will process you. It's a bit like, I just want to say this. Those of you who have been long time Warrant Law members, you know what I'm going to say. The tea coffee analogy of Zevs. Just because you're offered just tea and coffee doesn't mean there are not other options. He'll always say there's top shelf whiskey, there's filtered water, there's orange juice. Ask the right questions to get the right answers. Now, can you tell airlines you don't consent to facial recognition? You can, but you won't get a custom private contract with them. What you can do is notify the airline in advance via email or phone and just say, look, I am actually opting out of facial recognition and biometric scanning. I will present my ID manually. Also notify the airport staff when you check in. They just simply note it and send you to the staffed counters instead. And notify border control on arrival in any country. They must provide an alternative because biometric systems are convenience tools, not mandatory identity tools. The legal reason: biometrics are not part of the treaty right of entry under international law. They are simply an efficiency measure. Now, I've got further information about how to avoid digital surveillance, data retention via the airlines, etc. And I will list that in our PDF booklet. Alrighty. And there's other scripts about border control, etc., which may be useful for those who love world travel. So I will go down to our next question that's been emailed in. Oh, okay. This one is a hefty one. And this is just an ad hoc one. It was literally sent in just before we jumped on. I would like to know about having to pay taxes against not being required to register to pay taxes. All right, so I will put several links about education that we've offered in the past about whether the ATO is a legal entity, what it can, what it can't do, whether tax is voluntary. I will, to save time on this call today, I'll just put the links in the PDF booklet. The short of it is the ATO is a legal entity, and we have had a tax commissioner in this country since the 1920s. Whether you have to register to pay tax or not is whether you choose to take part in the system of several processes. So if you choose to be an employee, PAYG, the only way an employer these days, if you're an employee, you'll have to submit a tax file number. If you're not using a tax file number, they will tax you at the highest threshold, which is not really, you might as well not even work as an employee. And you do have to do a personal tax return every year because you're choosing to partake to receive dollars in that process. If you choose to have a proprietary limited company or a public commercial trust or a sole trader, you have registered with ASIC for an ABN and an ACN. And yes, then you're under there. You've signed a contract. That's a contract. You do need to adhere to those public obligations. I am not saying whether I agree with tax or not. I am not saying whether I agree that what they tax us on is lawful. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the procedures, the processes, and the data. So if you adhere to those contracts, it's a lot less voluntary. But like the tea and coffee analogy, if we only think we're offered tea and coffee, we're only going to choose tea or coffee. But behind me is sitting filtered water, orange juice. There's no alcohol in this household, so I will not be offering top shelf whiskey, but there is amazing ginger beer, kombucha, coconut water. So, what are those items? There are other ways to skin a cat that are outside of the ASIC ATO jurisdiction under international covenants, laws, and treaties. I will share further education about those remedies and those options in the PDF booklet. So, short and tall of it, this whoever has sent this in, I could say you might have a tax debt, and that's why you've asked this question. If you do have a tax debt, please reach out and we'll point you in the right direction to get really accurate remedy options regarding that. We don't want to put a red flag on our head. And I will look at the camera and say one more time that there are some truther, we'll use the word sovereign, pretend accountants on this planet who have said that tax is voluntary and that the ATO is not a legal entity. Not voluntary is a legal entity. If you want to have more yarns about that, reach out to Zev. He's always happy to talk about those and the cowboy tactics that some of the truther movement share. Alrighty, so what are lawful tools for dealing with harassment, though, by agencies or corporations such as the ATO? I really want to look into this. Recently, we had a wonderful Warrior Law member who did receive a letter to say that they've started auditing her. So let's look at what we can do. I'm always about what we can do, not what we can't do. So I'm going to have a look at that. Just bear with me. Now, I will never do share screen out of confidentiality and also IP, but I will share it with you verbally. And then I am going to share this template in the PDF booklet. So if the ATO, it's a very automated letter, but if you got a letter saying that we're going to audit you for whatever reason, that's an offer. So how about we reply to that offer with a formal request for better and further particulars? It's one of Zev's favourite lines. So, to the Australian Tax Office, I acknowledge receipt of your correspondence dated, whatever the date is. A copy of your document has been retained for my private records. So take a photocopy of the letter or email, and then we're going to send this letter with the original. back to them. The original instrument is returned herewith as no agreement has been reached and no lawful certainty exists as to the character, jurisdiction, standing, or validity of the document issued. This return does not constitute acceptance, agreement, assent, joinder, compliance, or submission to any administrative, statutory, commercial, or contractual frameworks or obligations. This communication is issued in honour, in clean hands, in good faith, on a without prejudice, without recourse basis, so as to save costs, and must not be construed as acceptance of any contract or commercial instrument, any administrative jurisdiction, any presumption or liability, any action taken by the ATO must be put before a court to be enforceable. Where is the court order to enforce this? Any joinder to any artificial or statutory entity or any compliance obligation. And then we go on to list case precedents in Australian court. He who makes claim bears burden of proof. So there's amazing cases that have given clarity, authority, and lawful foundation evidence about procedural fairness consistent. So we continue to go on about having clean hands. Now, most of the time, the court jurisdiction has been based on the King James version of the Bible. Now, I am not a Christian. I do have my own faith, but I'm not a Christian. However, the King James Version Bible is a great read, and it has a lot of information that is shared in the court system over history, over time, and as of today. So I don't think it hurts to actually put some quotes from the King James Bible in there. You'll see that on Monday when you get the PDF. It's your decision whether you want to include that or not. What's really important is that we put it to them that they need to let us know who the delegated ministerial authority or officer in capacity was. They need to confirm the legal and administrative capacity of each person involved in this particular audit, whether that's a public officer, an agent, a delegate, heirs, successor nominees, representatives, assigns. You may notice if you've been listening to Zev over the years, he covers all the bases. He will include every definition and term to bung up all the holes so they can't be confused or misconstrued about the definitions. And we want them to provide the identity of the Minister of the Commonwealth who authorised this alleged audit, the issuance of your correspondence, and any investigation or inquestitorial actions and any enforcement powers relied upon by that specific minister. Please provide a certified copy of the minister's instrument of delegation, including the Enabling Act, the relevant section and subsection and any regulations, etc. So you can hear that we're just asking them the questions of their delegated authority. And also, it goes on to explain, well, why me? Why have you picked me out of the millions of men and women in Australia? They need to then justify why you have been chosen for the audit. So the full template for this is going to go in the PDF document that you receive, because it's a hefty letter and it's written legally. Zev will always say to me, he might see a notice or he might see a letter that another truther group has done, and he will say that will just get steamrolled over because you're not speaking their language. They have a definition of what they believe to be what these sovereign citizens are. So let's not speak in the language that they think sovereign citizens speak in. Let's speak in their language in terms of statute. Let's have administrative language because they are programmed robots. That's what they comprehend. So I will share with that template on Monday with you. Okay, just bear with me. All right. Now, before I go on to the next question, I'm going to have a quick look in the chat. What would be a justifiable reason? Yes, what would be a justifiable reason? My last little question at the end there of why have I been chosen out of the millions of humans with, and let's not go down the rabbit hole what humans means. The etymology of language really triggers me. So that question of why have I been chosen? They're going to really have to justify why specifically you out of everyone has been chosen. It's a dance of questions. Zev and I will always say when they give you an explanation, let's continue the dance and ask a question back. We'll have a little game of tennis, Julie. So, uh, does the UCC common law copyright not protect our breath and saliva during an RBT? That's a really good question, and I'm going to get Zev to speak more on that. There's a blurring of the lines of jurisdiction with that one, I think, Raymond, because while you're operating that vehicle with a driving license, it's all to do with you're holding that driving license under the state legislation. So I'm going to find out from Zev if that overrides that. This has nothing to do with the registration of the car. As you all know, Zev drives with UCC registration number plates. I don't really call them private plates because the vehicle's registered to himself, but the UCC is not a private secret process. It's the international standard of commerce. So it's not secret or private. And so his vehicle is registered to himself. And he has been stopped by police many times, and he shows the lawfully bound documents, and he shows that it's now registered with DFAT with the government, that it's legally recognised in Australia. However, Zev still has a state issued driving license. He hasn't worked his way around that one yet. He has a driving license he drives in Victoria, but he has a driving license in Queensland. So May is taking down all the questions, Raymond. I'm going to hit Zev up with that one so that we can get an answer for Monday. Oh, yes, and your license is autographed with all rights reserved. Okay, now I'm not speaking on behalf of Zev right now, just speaking on behalf of little old me. They don't care. That could just be part of your autograph. Your autograph could be Mickey Mouse with a paw print, all rights reserved. You're still signing and agreeing to the contract. So some may argue with me on this point, and I'm going to bring it up with Zev. But I find with all statute processes, I always imagine just a steamroller. You're here. They do not care. You've signed the contract and the fine print of all the road laws and regulations. They'll call them regulations. So that's that. All right. Every company now seems to require the creation of a photo ID card. Do you mean as in like when working for that company? Even back in the 90s, when I worked as an employee, I had an ID card which had a photo on it as well. So, have we talked much about the social media digital ID requirements on January 10th? Would VPN work to overcome it? I know some really tech savvy individuals, and yes, a VPN would work to overcome it. They'll just think you're in another country. Absolutely. However, I did share an education on my YouTube channel about the difference in legislations at play here. The legislation, which is going to be doing like age verification checks on social media in Australia from the 10th of December, is very different. It's not a digital ID requirement. It's very different to the government digital ID requirement. They're two different acts. And so I just find in this truth of sovereign freedom private movement, we take tiny little bit of truth without a lot of comprehension. I'm saying this with respect because the biggest power that we have is educating ourselves. And so the lines get blurred. I have shared an education about the two different acts and what we can do about the two different acts. It's just really important that we educate ourselves. The devil is in the detail. Now, with the 10th of December, my brother lives in the US, and everyone in the US, right? Can you imagine living in the US right now? Ugh, crazy. However, he's in an industry that relies on tech. So I asked him about this, and he said that Facebook, Meta, for the last 12 months have already been doing a lot of the verifications. People are worried about doing facial recognition to verify their age. Now, I don't know about you, but when you put a lovely family photo up on Facebook, and this has been happening for a decade, and you go to tag people, they automatically can recognize who is in the photo, can't they? Have they already been reading your face? Yes, they have. All I can say about this is just have a measured approach. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're not happy about that, don't use the benefit of social media. Now, on the 10th of December, everyone isn't all going to be blasted with, I'm trying to sign into Facebook or I go to my phone to, check what Uncle Charlie did on the weekend. Oh, it's not going to let me in. That is not going to happen. All right. What will happen is they've already tried to verify most accounts that say that they live in Australia. They have already done that. So you've probably already been ID checked. Your face has already been recognized. They think you look like an old whatever, you're fine, right? There are some people, though, when they put their initial information in, when they got their profile, that Facebook's automated AI systems haven't been able to fully decide whether you're over 16 or not. For those individuals, they will be asked to either do that thing where you just have to put your face in like an oval, and what they'll do is they'll match that with photos that are on Facebook, or in other circumstances, yes, they're going to ask to show a driving license. So at that point, the only reason Meta are doing this, it's not because Meta wants to be part of that. It's because the Australian government has said that they'll be fined, etc., etc. So I just want to bring a little bit of common sense into this, and it's got nothing to do with the digital ID. Now, with the digital ID, there's another education on my YouTube channel about the legislation about that. If you go to the Warrior Law website, and you go up to the member store, there is a free digital ID education kit which has typed up templates for written responses and verbal responses. We can only focus on today. Do you know I've been criticized that, oh, well, this is just for today. It won't be like that in the future. Yes, but I'm all about what we can do today. So let's just focus on what we can do today. And my crystal ball isn't letting me know how they're going to move the goalposts. And there's an amazing guy in Western Australia called Luke Dayton. He's just such a great guy. He has done a lot to fight the banks about the fraud of mortgages, etc. And we had a great chat on Wednesday. That chat is also on the YouTube channel. And he's just a really wise man. And we spoke about this, that we can focus on all these ifs and buts. But you know what? I find that a lot of people protest when it's too late. If you're so worried about all the acts and legislation that's going through, we all know when Parliament sits and the bills are going to go through Parliament. We actually said that one of us, we need to have a committee. Actually, maybe we can start this committee today. We need to set up a committee where we all take turns of being on watch. And one of us, right, we have a cyclical schedule where we watch what bills are about to go through Parliament sitting. We need to know ahead of time what the draft bills are going to be. So then we have time to rebut them. We have time to stand up and put energy. It's too late once it's in Parliament. So if anyone would like to start that committee, I will be part of the committee. I don't have enough time to be on the board, but if you want me to be on the committee, I will be, because this is the thing. We need, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? But we need to look at these acts that are going through way before they do. So that's where we need to look at it. And Luke and I were chatting about that. I hope I'm making sense about that. Um, okay, so if anyone else has any other questions, put them in here. We've got 15 minutes left, and I do want to touch on some other questions that were sent through. All right, I love this question. What happens When we teach our children about their lawful identity early. Yes. So I was a speech and drama teacher for children and youth for a very long time, and I'm a youth worker as well. And I've been thinking for a really long time to create some sort of workshop or education that is specific, not directed at children and youth, but directed at the parents of children and youth to man them with the tools to have these conversations. So, this question was sent in yesterday, which has reminded me of this little goal, this little project that I want to do under a private membership association for this specific reason. So, thank you, whoever sent this question in. It'll go a long way into what I'm going to create for that. So, what happens when we teach our children their lawful identity early? I love this. Teaching children their lawful identity early changes how they're going to move through life. They grow up knowing they are a living boy or girl, living male or female, not just as a registered person. And this gives them clarity, confidence, and a really strong internal grounding long before the systems try to take shape of them. I think I'm nearly 50. I was born into a very programmed system like most of us. So it's taken us a little bit longer to work it all out. Our neural pathways during that education time were really ingrained. I feel that if we can start young and educate young, they are going to know that there are more options than tea and coffee. Even so, I mean, they're probably going to be in the hardest generation so far of humanity when it comes to AI, digital compliance, etc. So let's arm them with the tools really early. Let's make sure that our young living children, our boys and our girls growing up to be living men and women, that they grow up confident, not fearful. Instead of absorbing fear of authority, fines, bureaucrats, I believe it's really, really important that they comprehend that I am not the legal name. I can just use it for my benefit. That authority requires my consent and that no contract equals no obligation. I really feel that this will go a long way for our young men and women to feel calm and self-assured because fear, the system relies on fear. We go back to that letter that said, oh, the ATO are going to audit her. What do you think happened straight away? Energy of fear hit them, which I really comprehend. It would me too. Fear comes into play. You then become reactive. You then think, I've got the energy of I'm in trouble. Let's turn the tables on that for our young men and women. It's really important that our youth recognize consent in contracts because it's not going to be taught in school. They start to see everything in the world is just an offer, that signatures do carry power, full disclosure is required, silence isn't an agreement, and that coercion invalidates contracts. I think it's so important that we give them the tools that prevents them from walking blindly into obligations later in life. Let's have critical thinking. I talk about critical thinking all the time. They will think critically, not reactively and automatically. Let's give them the tools so they can ask questions like, who is asking? Under what authority? And where is the contract? This now, for some of us, our children will still attend a school, etc. But this really does protect them from pressure at school, medical coercion. There is an education on my YouTube channel about a circumstance where a mother and daughter had to go to hospital and the doctors told the mother to leave. This daughter was only 12. Those doctors were saying that this 12-year-old had all the full capabilities to answer all the questions. And in that education, I do share the templates of what to say because this is happening all the time. Digital ID enrollment and deceptive authority figures. Let's teach our young ones to have discernment in our gut, right? It's also really important that youth comprehend before lawful versus legal. I mean, we're all grown-ups and we're struggling to comprehend lawful versus legal. It's really important that early on that they comprehend that statutes regulate persons, not living life force, living energy beings like us, right? Consent is the bridge into the system. And I feel like this will save them decades of unlearning because how do we all feel with the weight of unlearning, right? So let's just give them that gift. And I think it's important that we really educate them on natural law. Of course, we're going to teach them about good virtues, values, etc. And I think we need to focus on responsibility, not rebellion. I really don't feel a fight mentality gets us anywhere. So I think we need to learn to honor agreements, question before consenting, and respect others' own autonomy and take accountability for our actions. I just think that way we're teaching our children to navigate this time in this meat suit anyway with integrity instead of fear. So, do no harm, cause no loss. And of course, it will help them not rely on institutions and social media for their self-worth, and they're much harder to manipulate. So, I'm going to share all about that on the PDF on Monday. Now, hold me accountable. In a few months' time, if Warrior at Law has not released that education module about giving our youth tools, give me a metaphoric tap on the shoulder, please, and remind me because I think it's such a valuable tool that we can offer our Warrior at Law community for their young ones. Alrighty, I think there's a few more questions left. All right, okay. The question is, I'm really new to this space, but how do PMAs, trusts, and UCC filings form a complete protective ecosystem? I never really thought about it as an ecosystem, but yes, it is its own ecosystem outside of the public jurisdiction or the public highway. So we've only got a few minutes left. I just want to quickly touch on PMAs, private membership associations. It's been the title that's been marketed or bandied around the last 5 years in this space. Technically, what it is, a private membership association is an unincorporated association. The ATO even has a definition for this. As long as we have the correct international covenants, laws, and treaties, it must be the correct ones. We can't be just throwing paint at a wall. When I say correct, whatever country or land that you're standing in, we need to ensure that your projects are running under the bylaws that are attached to international covenants, laws, and treaties that have been ratified, which means written into just somewhere, even small, into legislation in the system. Let's use the system against the system because otherwise the system won't acknowledge what we're doing over here. And then we go back to that steamroller that I told you about before. So as long as you have that and that you're operating your association outside of the public jurisdiction, so you ensure that you're not doing trade, sales, commerce, sharing resources and education with any members of the public, because members of the public standing on that public jurisdiction highway under the umbrella of things like the ATO, ASIC, Therapeutic Goods Administration, APRA, etc. We want to ensure that we're not doing that. So they become a member first of our unincorporated association, and our projects are genuinely of service. We genuinely have purpose, mission, legacy, vision. We're genuinely offering real resources, education, benefits to our members. I think it's pretty simple. If anyone wants to have a yarn about that, you know where I am. Same with trusts. Not all trusts are the same. The magic of a trust is in the clauses of the deed and what it can and cannot do, and whether it's registered in that public statutory system with an ABN or if it's not. There is no such thing as a private trust. Zev says this all the time. It will remain private while it's sitting in its manila folder or on the hard drive of your computer. But as soon as you open your front door and you want to use it in the real world, for example, purchasing property or transferring title of property, setting up a bank account, whatever the trust is going to be used for, is it private any longer? So we really need to comprehend. It's almost like you need to know the rules to walk around the rules. This is why comprehending and getting guidance from those who really do comprehend legal and legislation, but also comprehend the alternative jurisdiction over here and what's lawful is just really vital. And I always talk about covering both butt cheeks, the right butt cheek, the left butt cheek. The right butt cheek is the dead entity, the all caps name on the birth certificate. The right butt cheek is your life force, living energy, the living, breathing, living woman sitting here, and also your back. Let's make sure no one can put a knife in your back, and that's trust. So we've got the UCC, unincorporated association, and trust. There is education on the Warrant Law website about that. I do encourage you to look at that. All right. They are all the topics and questions that were sent in, and I really value those Warrant Law members who sent them in. They're really valuable, and I think many, many, many will benefit from the answers to that. So, in the last 5 minutes, I'm just having a quick look at the chat box. May is taking down everything in the chat box, by the way, so we will respond to everything that's in that chat conversation. Have not been consenting about the smart meter. All right, Glenda, again, we have an education about the smart meters. Let's always focus on what we can do, not what we can't do, because I joke about it, but we cannot fly to privacy planet. And the only way to fully live in the private is if we had billions and billions, maybe trillions of dollars, our own currency, our own systems, our own roads. You get the drift. So there is education about the smart meters and what you can and cannot do. So go take a look at that. I want to sow a seed here in which I would like to put to Zev. In my view, I think Australia has gone far down this GovCorp path, and the only real forward is having a new full reset by creating a new Declaration of Independence and a new constitution. I love this, Mr. Bean. I love it so much. Australia, the government of Australia is not making the rules. I've lived in England. I travel the world often. Even in places like India, it's exactly like it is here. They just eat different food. It's everywhere. This is a global issue. And we can't move to privacy planet. So I totally agree with you. I would say there's about 13 puppeteers running the whole world. Most of our legislation comes down from international bodies that we didn't vote in, which we all know about. It's a real quandary, isn't it? And we could talk more about that. And unfortunately, are they paying any attention to the Constitution? And is the Constitution even Australian? It was an act of UK Parliament. And then I could go back in history further to that. And then it would fall down like a house of cards. So yeah, that's a big one. I love this. In my opinion, we need a new Constitution Republic of Australia. Again, this political side of things is not my area of genius, and I don't have a lot of time for it because in my experience, I have seen that it doesn't matter. You could be a republic, you could be a Commonwealth nation, and when I zoom out and look at the entire planet, it is all run by the international bodies. Now, what can we do about that at an international level? That's where we need to look. I believe that a lot of these wonderful truther groups have really good hearts, but they're focusing their energy on the wrong thing. And guess what? The system wants them to focus the energy on the wrong thing. They don't want a huge, strong community really knowing what's going on. So I encourage you to zoom out, metaphorically in your brain, zoom out and look at the planet and have a look at the history of commerce. And then have a look at the families of commerce. And there might be about 13 who are puppeteering the international bodies. And then we get down to a government level, and politicians, they just want to puff their chest out, their ego, right? They think they're doing the right thing. A lot of the politicians thought they were doing the right thing and it made them feel good on the inside during COVID. Numpties, they're not educated. Most of them are not educated. They'll be they'll have the Minister for Environment. I'll be like, I could do their role in a heartbeat. Do you even comprehend how sand dunes are made? No. So why are they the Minister of the Environment? Do you see what I'm saying? Anyway, but yes. Would Zev be interested in being part of a working group to develop such a declaration and constitution? Zev and I work very closely together, as you know. I can hand on my heart say he would say no. Not because he doesn't believe in common law and parts of the Constitution, but he does agree with me. We talk about this daily, about what I've just spoken about, and that we need to focus energy somewhere else because you're literally just going to swap one slave master for another. It'll be just a different kind of duck that quacks a little bit differently, but I would love to hear further more on what you want to say about that. Okay. So, Okay, I'm just scrolling down this. We will pay attention to all of these things. Is it safe to use the bill of exchange to pay for utilities? Zev will always say that if utilities are private companies, but then it's attached to government departments. In our experience, we've seen it very difficult. We do not see that utilities work with promissory notes or bill of exchange. They just, again, they're the steamroller. You'll just keep getting the automated letters, right? Until they send you to a debt collectors. And then, yes, the debt collectors have purchased that debt. You can maybe manage it at that level. And Zev's very good at dealing with negotiations when it comes to debt collectors. So if that ever happens to you, let us know. So we've been here an hour. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in the questions. I do promise you that any questions, because we had a few people emailing questions in while I was talking. It's too late, but I'll make sure that they're in the PDF and that your answers are there. Anyone who I'm always about, let's focus on what we can do, not what we can't do, because I like a life of ease, grace, and flow, and we only get one chance in this meat suit anyway. So if you want to have a chat about actual, tangible, real life remedies that don't put red flags on your head, that aren't full of misinformation, that are tangible remedies to protect both our butt cheeks and our back. You know where we are. Always happy to yarn about it. I could talk underwater about this all day. I hope everyone has a beautiful weekend. If you do have a question that's just popped out now, please send it in to us. We are of service. We do thank our Warrior at Law members for contributing to the project of our PMA because it allows us to be of service to families coming out of DV, environmental projects, some very valid First Nations issues, which we all donate our time to. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.